Hi everyone, this is Satyajit. Welcome to my channel CloudJourney with Satyajit. In the last videos, we discussed about what is endpoint policies and how we can endpoint policy to how we can restrict the buckets, okay, from specific VPCs. So if you see my diagram, so now we need to create two VPCs. One is dev VPC and is prod VPC, and resources will be there in the dev and prod. And there are two buckets. One is dev bucket and is prod bucket. Now we need to create two endpoints, one VPC A and one is VPC B. So in that VPCA is like dev VPC. When someone wants to access the dev bucket, it will be working perfectly for that, but he cannot access the prod bucket. And in case of prod, on the prod VPC, so when someone try to access the dev bucket, it will throw an error, but they can able to access the prod bucket. Okay, so now let's jump into the practical how to do that. Okay. So if you see my VPC, so I created two VPCs. One is VPC A, just consider VPC A is a dev and VPC B is the prod, and both are different CIDR. Okay. So now if you see in the VPC A, if I copy the VPC ID, okay, and if you go to the EC2 instance, so I have two EC2 instance. Okay, one is jump server, which is public subnet. If you see, it has public IP, and there is an app server which doesn't have public IP, and it's network. It is in private subnet. If you go to the networking, it is in private subnet. Okay, so this is private. Then in the VPC B also, I did the same thing. In the VPC B, if you go to the VPC B, the EC2 instances, to copy, there are also two EC2 instances. So one is jump server B and app server B. Okay, so now I will connect to the VPC A jump server. Okay, so let me go to the VPC A jump server. Now I don't have any endpoint. If you see the endpoint, I don't have any endpoint now. Okay, so without endpoint, now I'm able to see, I'm able to access it or not. Okay, so now I need to go to the EC2 instance of VPC A, the jump server, and I will copy the public IP, and let me zoom it. Okay, the terminal. Okay, a little bit more. Now I can able to access. I specify the private key. Then I will specify the public IP. I'm sorry, I mistake the command. I need to do the at the rate. Okay, so I am able to access to the public subnet. Okay, and I created. I don't have any route table. I don't have any VPC endpoint now. Let me jump into the private subnet. Okay, so the private subnet, there is no NAT gateway, and if I do AWS S3 LS, I can able to list both the buckets. Okay, let me check why it is okay. It will not work. Okay, why? Because it doesn't have any NAT gateway and doesn't have any endpoint, so it is not going to work. Okay, because any should connectivity required. So let me create endpoint for that. Okay, so now I will go to the endpoint, create an endpoint. Now I will create two endpoint. Okay, one is VPC A endpoint. Okay, and here I need to search for the S3. So S3, I need to select the gateway. We'll discuss more in interface endpoint, but now we will concentrate about the gateway. Once the gateway is selected, and I will give the VPC A, and here route table, I will only consider the private route table. Okay, and I'm not adding now any policy. I'm giving full access. Okay, so now let me create the endpoint. Okay, so by that time I will create another endpoint for VPC B. Okay, so VPC B endpoint. This time also I need to select the same S3 gateway and in the VPC B and the private route table. Okay, so here also I'm giving full access. I'm not giving any custom policies. So now both the endpoints are created. If you see, both the status are in available state. Okay, and let me check, because as I added into the route table, automatically it will create a route. Okay, we don't have to worry about the route. Let me check the private route table of private subnet A and check the routes. There is, see, the peering routes is already added. Okay, one new so not peering VPC endpoint. If you see the private route table of B and go to the routes, there is a VPC endpoint route added. So now I can able to access the S3 bucket. If you see here now, let me zoom it. Okay, let it be. So now I will do AWS S3 LS. I can able to list the bucket. Why? Because endpoint is connected. Earlier it was unable to access because there was no endpoint and there was no internet gateway. Sorry, there is no NAT gateway. So now if I do AWS S3 LS, S3, let me zoom it. Okay, and then this is the dev environment, right? So now I will do the prod. So I can able to list it. Okay, and by the meantime I can able to list the dev also, like all the test bucket. Okay, I can able to list it, so there is no restrictions. I can do both list, I can upload it, right? There will be no problem. So now same thing I will try it from uh, the other VPC B EC2 instance, right? Let me go to the jump server B. Okay, and public subnet, and I will, and both are using same key. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so I am able to access to the jump server. Okay, jump server of the public key. So if you see the 20 IP, okay, let me connect to the private. This is the private instance of this jump server VPCB. So if you do AWS S3LS, it is also going to work. Okay, now again it is not working. Why? Because endpoint is connected. This is a troubleshooting steps, right? So endpoint is connected, but still I am unable to access. Why? Because it doesn't have any role. Okay, it doesn't have any IAM role attached or any credentials configured. So what we'll do, already we have the role. You can go to the actions, go to the security, modify IAM role, and we can choose the same role. Why? Because the role is global. IAM is global services. We can attach. We don't have to create separate role for that. We can create the same role. So now I have attached the role. If I do AWS S3LS, okay, it may take some time to update it. So let me exit it. Okay, and I will again create another sessions. This is my private. Okay, let me exit from this. Okay, and again connect to the private EC2 instance, and let's try WS3LS. Okay, still it is saying it cannot configure. Let me check the role is attached or not. Okay, my bad. I allow to the jump server B. Okay, EC2 S3 role, but in the app server we are trying to connect from app server B. Okay, so here there is no role attached, no IAM role. That's the reason it was not working. Okay, I can go to the again the role and select the EC2 S3 role and update the IAM role. So it will work perfectly now. There will be no concern. Okay, AWS S3 LS, it can able to list the bucket. Okay, so now this is the prod. Okay, so AWS S3 LS S3, and I want to go for the prod. It can able to list the object. Okay, and same way I can go for the test. Okay, I can able to list the bucket. So now there is no restriction. It is working perfectly. And here, if you see, Google is not working because there is no NAT gateway. Okay, internet is not working. Everything happening through endpoint. So now we want to restrict it. Okay, so to restrict it, I said like we need to create a endpoint policies. Okay, so now we need to go to the VPC endpoint. Okay, respective endpoint, and VPC A endpoint, and we have to create a policies. We can go to the policies, edit policies. Okay, and we can custom policies. So whatever the policies full allowed, I will remove it. So I have created one policy. It is already there with me. I can use, and I can go through that policies. Okay, I'll copy all these policies. I can go paste it here. Okay, what is that meaning? It is saying it is the version is common, say endpoint policy. It is deny the creations and delete on a bucket. Like from there, we cannot create a new bucket using CLI, and we cannot delete also. Okay, for resource star, any bucket or anything we cannot delete, we cannot create. Okay, then list operation is allowed. I can list all the buckets. That's the reason allow star list all my buckets. I can list all. Okay, but see here, only allow to do all the operations to respective only test bucket. Okay, I cannot do for the prod bucket. So this is the policies. So here deny the create and delete bucket is denied. It can list all the buckets, but it can do all these operations only on these buckets. Okay, all only on these buckets. Okay, now I need to save it. Okay, this is my VPC A endpoint. It means my jump server A or app server A. So from this app server A, I can only access to the test bucket, but I cannot access to the prod bucket. Okay, let me verify it. So I can go to the terminal, and but I'm in the jumps of B, right? I have to connect to this 10.0 series. 10 means this is my VPC A. Then I need to connect to the private. Now I am able to connect to the app server A, like the VPC A, which I talk about dev environment. Now, if I do AWS S3 LS, it will pretty simple work. It will list all the bucket. But our main requirement is we cannot list the prod bucket. Let us see AWS S3 LS and see the prod bucket. Okay. Sorry, my bad. It was not copied properly. AWS S3 LS, and when I do AWS S3 LS S3, and I have to specify this prod bucket. Okay, but it will show access denied. Okay, because access denied. But let us try the same for this test bucket. I can able to list. See, now I cannot do on the prod because same, but it restricted to the endpoint policies. If I want to copy, let's say I'm putting some object. Okay, AWS S3 CP e.txt S3. Let's say I'm putting into the prod bucket. So put object also it will say as denied. Prod bucket will say it's access denied. Okay, upload failed. But same thing if I will go with the test bucket, it will show it will successful. It is uploaded. Okay, so there will be no issues. Okay, because we restricted the policy. If you want allow means, then what we need to do? We need to go to the endpoint policies and go to the policies. Again, edit policies, then I need to just add. Okay, I will just doing that also. I'll do copy, then again add this block. Okay, so instead of test, I will just add prod, and here also to the prod. That's it. Okay, and I'll just save it. So now I have added the both the policies. It means I can able to list now. Let us do AWS S3. I can able to list. Now I can able to list the prod bucket as well, because I configured, I modified the policies. Okay, I can able to list. It will not show list denied. Okay, so now it's the policy is working perfectly. Okay, so we verified. So now I need to remove those policies, edit policies that which I added, right? So because this is not required. That's it. Save. So now from the dev environment, I cannot access to the prod bucket. Same way, we can go to the prod environment, and here we can restrict. We can go to the policies, edit policies, and I will remove the full access. And I will here, instead of test, we can do on the prod. It will only access to the prod, but it will not access to the dev. Just copy the policies and go and paste it. Once again, it is deny all the create and delete operations, allow list all the buckets, but it allow only to the prod bucket on the prod environment. Okay, so now I updated the policies. Now again, I need to log in. I'm exiting from the VPC A resources. Now I need to go to the VPC B resources, which is 20 series. Again, I need to connect to the private EC2 instance. It's fine, I can connect. Now we'll do AWS S3 LS. It will list all the buckets. Okay, but now if I do AWS S3 LS, sorry, it will not able to list all the object of the test bucket, because I don't have the permissions, because I only allowed in the endpoint policy for the prod. It will show list denied, but same time it will work for the prod, because I allow only the prod bucket. It will able to list. Okay, so in this way we can restrict. Okay, we can restrict the permissions in a more efficient manner, and we can secure our environment. Okay, so now we understood how to create an endpoint policies like gateway endpoint policies, and we can restrict. So now in this way, only the dev server, okay, dev environment server can access to the dev bucket, and the prod environment server can access to the prod bucket, but they can able to list all the buckets, how many buckets are there. Okay, so I will update that endpoint policies in the descriptions, so you can use that. And if you can practice both the scenarios, and if you have any questions or any concern, just put in the comments. I will be happy to help you. Thank you for watching my videos.